Okay. Hi, everybody. Just before we start, small world, in fact, small world, that's funny. The joke as you go on. We're presenting here very different work than we normally do. We're normally very precise on specific events of the classroom, looking at kids doing strategies. And so 2 years ago, I presented stuff on mental math that we worked on. And we're working normally on very qualitative sort of analysis. But today we're going to do something completely different because we started to be interested in getting some sort of a bigger picture of the whole classroom, how it works in the classroom we were working in. So we need to get you into that mindset of looking at the whole somehow. We're going to lose a lot of information looking at this whole in a classroom, all of these small details we normally pay attention to. But our intention is also to see if we can gain something out of this. And so it's the first time we present these sort of preliminary results, and we thought that fields here could be a good place with open minds to talk about these things. So that's the setup. Oh yeah, I should put the time on that we make sure we're good. Okay, yeah. We like to talk. Okay, so let's just look into how did this all began? In fact, we have a project, and Joyce is part of it, where we work on, you heard about this collective mathematical system, looking at the collective in the classroom. There's this big project where we're interested, in fact, in finding or developing methodology to get a sense of the entire classroom. And through this, we have many different things we're setting up and trying out. And one of those pleased me more than the others. And I thought we could explore it much more deeply in our small research lab. That's where Kevin is also working in. And so we thought, what if we represented, so all these very interesting people were there we were in the same room. What if we represented, in fact, each mathematical idea that would happen in a classroom, one after the other, and try to map that out, to just get a sense of what are all the ideas that happen during that session or classroom work. So, of course, this is exploratory. So we tried something. So I had data of a sequence with teachers. So it's not even in the classroom. We just wanted to try it out. Where we gave a very famous problem of psychologist Nelting, who asked which mix would be sweeter from the top and the bottom. So we tried, in fact, to map by each idea being represented. It's not that important that you follow up how it unfolded, what are the ideas that were shared, but mostly get a sense of how things unfolded. The people you saw on the screen were all interested in emergence and all these ideas that are unfolding, so we tried to map them. So in this problem, so for example, each idea, and I'm just going to press the button as we go on, each idea that come up in the discussion in the small session with teachers was represented by a bubble. And then whenever an idea, a subsequent idea would show up, then we would link these two ideas. That's why you see links. And sometimes if someone goes back and forth between 2 or 3 ideas, we would just enlarge the link. So that's what we tried to do, trying to map out how do these teachers with a teacher educator that was there were making sense of what was going on. So trying to answer the problem. Some were talking about equivalencies, one more, one left. So you don't really see, but that's not that important. Because what we wanted to get is how, in fact, what sort of map we would get at the end, and how we would get, how many ideas, how would they unfold, how would it chronologically go on in the session. There were many ideas shared out of a 10-minute transcript. I think we're good. Okay, we'll switch back to it. And when we looked at this, we thought, well, that's interesting to look at the classroom like this, the session, 10-minute thing, and say, there are many ideas, many of them are connected, some less connected, there's some ideas that are recurring. They come up often. Some are more connected to one another. And so we got interested in this. And I thought, well, there's maybe even more to do on this. Why don't we do it, let's say for real, on an entire classroom, trying to see in varied classrooms, but let's just take one to start somehow. What would it look like as a map if we did that, the same thing? So putting any idea in a bubble, linking them, see all the links that are being made through this. Yeah, and so that's what I wrote here, is that we got some sort of a visual sense of what happened, of what how it unfolded, how it was connected. So to somehow push a little bit further, we tried with complete sessions of then 50 minutes. And with kids in that time, where we were working with kids, and then with all these videotapes we had, we said, why don't we try that with also these tapes? So different sorts of what we could call problem-solving sessions with elementary students, or sometimes secondary students too, where we would ask problems like, what's the what fraction is represented here? Here, what's the shaded triangle? What does it represent in terms of the rectangle? And so these sort of questions we would ask the kids, and then we would be in a plenary mode, having them answer what they thought was the answer, and then interacting between themselves and with the teacher. And so we said, why don't we try to map these sort of sessions? So that's the map we got. It's quite, I mean, for us, it's quite impressive. We're able to read it. I know how it unfolds. It's not chronological. It's here and there, but a lot of links, darker links. Some of the, now we're not in bubbles anymore. We're serious with rectangles. So then you have darker ones that show that some of the ideas are recurring in the classroom. I'm just going to show you how it unfolds also. Yes?
Sorry, I might miss something. How are these pictures generated? Like, do you film the stuff and then you...
Yeah, okay, so we have, yeah, maybe I went too fast on this. So we have classroom, we work with it, and of course we videotape them. And then we would look at the videos, and each time we would hear an idea, we would code it, and then put it into that small bubble.
Okay.
Does it...
Based on your subjective understanding of linking, or like the students actually responding to each other's notions?
Well, in fact, I mean, of course, when we hear an idea, we have a sense of, let's say, we talk about fractions, we would get a sense of, okay, now we're talking about doubling, or they're talking about the half, or the denominator being twice as big, or so then we would flag that as an idea. And for the links, in fact, as they're of course referring to the ideas they were referring before. That's where we would link. But we also focus, that's a bit specific, we would focus on the links, not that we saw, but that were explicitly made in the classroom. Because of course we could see much more links than they were doing, but of course it doesn't mean they're there. And that's fine, fine. So here's, for example, I'm going to show you how how the map was created. But I wanted you to pay attention how, in fact, at a certain point, there starts to be interlinked somehow between some parts. So here you have a number of ideas that are being shared, and it's mostly chronological, like you see an idea coming up after the other. And as we go on, then as the session goes on, it's a 45-minute session, so there's some ideas that start to link back to previous ideas. You'll see that coming up. You see now there's links that are going back to things that were said before, back and forth to some ideas, and are becoming darker and darker as new ideas are being shared. But of course, what you have also to appreciate in this is that we're mostly picture drawing. Like we don't really have a systematic way of where would we put the idea. We just want to fill the page. And so there's some links that are quite long, but at the same time, it doesn't mean much. It's just that we needed a place. Yes? Go ahead. Was there? Yes, there was. Yeah. Well, we don't know. I mean, we're not at the point of looking at only people talking together. I mean, that's what you're asking? Just a small group of kids sharing an idea?
There must be maybe a
It could. It could. Yeah. It's clearly possible. We're not at this point yet, but that's something we might be interested in looking into. But those are taught sessions, let's say, with teachers asking questions and kids responding to themselves. So this is the sort of map we got in the end, getting this. And then we said, well, there's something we're able to see, and also this idea that there's a lot of links between each idea. So what we tried is also to do it with other sessions. So we have plenty of those maps. And some are maybe, they seem more connected, let's say, or parts are less connected and here and there.
There's questions in a few minutes.
Yeah, let's do that. Because, yes. And yeah, we could, yeah, I'll talk about this. Time flies. But, okay, so at the same time we were doing this, our group that I talked before, we decided we would look at widely available classrooms. Of course, we worked with our classrooms that we work with kids, but there are many available online, for example from the TIM studies. So you might know these ones. It's like one from the US, from the Japan. We just picked them as a group because they were available online. There's no reason for having picked them except the fact that anybody could look at it. If you go online, you can watch that 15-minute thing. So what we tried also is to map these sorts of classrooms that are very different from the ones we were working with, because we didn't have the same intentions, and the kids were different, and the setup is clearly different. And we also created maps out of this. And we used also, maybe some of you know about Jo Boaler's work. There's even a book by Jo Boaler outside. So she has online a border problem, about 30 to 35 minutes. So we also tried to map that to see if, well, could there be differences between these different sorts of teaching? For example, what could we see? We're really into an exploratory mode into seeing this. But as we did, that's fine. I mean, for us, it's fine. I'm not sure you get a sense of this, but we get some sort of a map. But we thought, and that's where Kevin comes in, and we'll have this reflection more deeply, is that we might use tools to read that. I mean, I can't necessarily read that map. What's in this? Is there more correct connections or less? It's difficult for me to see. Of course, when it's becoming very dark and black, you see that there's a lot of recurrence, but it's very difficult. So that's where we thought we would use tools from network theory. So I'm going to leave Kevin to this. And bear in mind, and I'm always impressed by this, Kevin is a BS student. He's doing this part-time. Probably he's going to do a master's then, but so that's his first shot at these ideas. So we'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, so from maps to networks. So we wanted to maybe look or compare each maps and see what difference there would be between those maps. So we started to look at some literature you see from before. So this is some very early works on networks where you can see a network where there's a star-shaped network where you can imagine that if you remove the center of the network basically doesn't exist anymore. You would have a decentralized network, sometimes called a small world network too, where there's some hubs and some other nodes in the network that are maybe have one link or two links. And you have distributed network, or maybe lattice-like, where pretty much every node in the network has the same number of links with other nodes. You see here also some work from Proulx, where there's other types of topologies. So I'm just going to go through that. So here are some of the questions we were asking ourselves before actually implementing network theory. So is there hubs? Is there ideas that are maybe more important in the session that other ideas gravitate around? Yeah, that's it. So here is the first step that we went through for networking. So we have a map. This is Jo Boaler's map that we did. And what we basically did is each case that contains an idea, we transformed it into a number in order of their appearance in the session. when we got that, we actually we described each links by the two nodes that are the extremities of that link. So let's say I have node 1 is connected with node 45, so the link is going to be 145. So we got a big list of links that we can put now into Excel and then generate these network here. So this is the same. This is actually the same session, but displayed in two different layouts. So the first one would be the radial layout, and the second one the circular layout. You can see here that in the first one there's a node at the center around which others tend to gravitate. And on the other side, we have like what seems to be clustering phenomenon inside the network. I'm going to show you here. This is.
But just if you go back to the previous one, so of course we started to be interested in what could be that
sure.
kind of node.
Yeah, so in this one would be the, I don't know if you remember the problem with the musical notes.
Fractions.
With the fractions, and as it turns out, the one that is in the middle is would be equivalent.
In this case was equivalent fraction, but we were wondering, like, with this idea, we could then study if that idea felt as central in the classroom itself, and also look at how it plays out in the network. The same thing here, to wonder what is that cluster about. Is there like a thematic, is that a thematic cluster, and what are the other cluster and the other one? So we got this other sort of picture, which is now more of a, like without the ideas there, that could give us a sense, I mean, gives us a visual display of what happened in the classroom in terms of ideas.
So really quick, here is other radial layout that we call of the network. So on the left side you have Tim's Japan. On the other side, you have US, and then there's Jo Boaler's work. You can, I don't know, probably you can't see. Yeah, it's hard to see. But in the one in the middle, the US is actually disconnected. So we have, if you want, 3 different continents in your network.
So here, in fact, that's something that's one thing that we saw visually, is that in fact it's not one network but 3. So there's moments in the session that are different. I mean, in the sense that they're not connected in the session. There's
no explicit link made between those 3 parts in the session. We are circular networks, so you can see difference here where there's for the Japan session you have one big cluster. And for the US, you got on the top right, there's the different parts that are not connected, but you still have on the left side like 4 big clusters in the network. So what makes that happen, we're not sure yet, but we're looking into that. We also, maybe finish with that, I guess. What happens when we remove actually one node in the network? So this would show you an idea of what would happen. It would like deconstruct the network. And here's another example with Japan. When we removed the node in the middle, it kind of kept its structure, actually. So and
we thought this is quite, sorry, Kevin, but it's quite interesting, because if we're interested in topological robustness, like how does the network is robust? In the previous case, when you took the middle one, it's somehow a little bit collapsed somehow. So it's a sign that there's an idea that links things together, but also if you take it out, the other ideas are still connected, but there's the beginning of a disconnection. In terms of the other session, it almost doesn't change anything. So, I mean, we're also intrigued to the sense that there might be much more connections between neighbors and ideas in this sort of session than in the previous one, on the musical notes, as you said. And we could stop there, but the thing that we also want to talk about, just as a very quick thing, is that in network theory, they're not only interested in laying them out, because in fact it's a very small part of what they're interested in. They're mostly interested in measures. many different sorts of measures like centrality, connectedness, robustness, and so we're now working on this. Of course, time doesn't allow us this, but Kevin has worked on developing a number of measures to try to study in more detail this robustness of the...
Try to characterize, if you want, the network.
Exactly. And get a sense of what's going on this. But, so yeah, we'll stop there. We're also...
I knew I wouldn't have enough time for this.
Yes, of course.
But I want to figure what it takes of what they're going to find out about in the future.
Sure.
The final project presented, because I'm very interested in this idea, and I know we're going to have a bunch of questions for you as well. We do have to limit it to about 5 minutes, but again, we can continue at lunch. So I cut someone off earlier. Yeah, sorry, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm from the Marlborough School in Toronto, and I was interested in this because one of the things we're looking at is this idea of when students start to build ideas. And I noticed you said there's a point where they start going back. At what point in the process do you think it starts to happen?
There's no point really, because if I may, let's see this. So this is the adjacency matrix. You can see that you have either patterns like this or patterns like this. And this comes out because the ideas, we numbered them in terms of their appearance in the session. And so what you see here basically is that some ideas connect themselves to ideas that come after it, but other ideas connect themselves to ideas that have come before. But we haven't found any patterns yet inside this, but we know that something's there about that.
But there's in the network theory literature, I forgot the name of the point where it's not threshold, but there's a part in the network as the connections go on that it switches somehow and becomes much more, phase transition, where it gets very connected. This is something we're quite interested in because, in fact, it's not only just building a fishnet, but then it becomes interlinked somehow between them. Obviously, the very trivial thing that I would say, it's after a certain amount of time. Of course, you need some ideas to be out there. But there is, in many sessions, a point where it starts to link back, as we called it. Or that links become darker because ideas get set back and forth. But it's an important point because in the phase transition literature, there's something, the network changes substance. The nature of the network changes. It could be, for example, for a while, a random network and then become scale-free. And there's something else that happens. And because we have enough time, like 45 minutes, there's a lot of chances that we are able to see that transition happening. Or not. And that would also tell us something. Because if we go back to the
Jo Boaler,
the Baron thing. So this, we thought at first that, not us, but I mean the community of researchers thought that this would be much stronger. That's how we wanted to build the internet. This disappears, it doesn't change anything, other people can link that. Then we realized this was maybe more interesting. But if you think in terms of classrooms, from our point of view, it doesn't make much sense to think in terms of distribution like this, because not all ideas in a classroom are as important from the other. This is like everyone has the same sort of importance. And in this case, there's some hubs where ideas would have more links and be more important. So that's also something that we're quite keen in looking more details.
And in some of the, if I may, the early measurements that we've done, we can see that most of the ideas in the network have very few links, but a few bunch have a very high number of links.
Carol?
Can I just ask, the videos that you watched, was the conversation occurring in a linear manner, or were there multiple conversations going on at the time?
I mean, the data that we tried to map, for example? It's on a plenary mode, so chronologically. But even if time goes on, some ideas would be re-talked about in the future. That would
Was one person speaking at a time?
Mostly. Sometimes but yeah, when we were in a moment where we hear two ideas at the same time, we make sure we hear them well to it to map them. Yeah. But everything that happened in non-plenary mode, we didn't pay attention to it. So that's something we have no access to because we can't really map whatever you guys are talking in this. And so we're just.
Thank you.
I just want to say this works out really interesting, especially when questions about how do we map to curriculum, for example, like a problem-based learning approach. I'm just curious whether you did try using specific curriculum linkages within the notes, or were you more going freely based on what they're saying and not taking that extra step to say, well, by the way, they're doing a bigger problem, but they're hitting fluent practice, for example, in those other areas.
So there's a group of colleagues in Israel that are doing what you're saying. It's very different in the sense that they have their curriculum map out. We have, at first, nothing, just a problem. And they map out the curriculum and hear the sessions and make links between the ideas that are there. One thing that they gain the same layout and they can compare the links. In our case, but the thing that they lose somehow is that if a kid says something that is not in the map, there's a problem now. It doesn't necessarily happen all the time, but there's also something that they can. In our case, we start from scratch. The problem we have is that we don't get the same layout as you saw in the maps. That's why we went for network theory. They don't feel the need of colleagues to go for network theory because they have a map. In our case, we get this messy thing. But at the same time, what we gain is any idea that the kids are sharing that are relevant. Of course, we would have to define relevant, but let's say that are mathematical. When they want to talk about fractions, of course, kids have their own ways of talking about fractions that might not be the correct one. And so we are able to map them. So we have gains, but we have losses also at the same time. Yeah. But we also have a problem comparing with the curriculum because it's not set up in advance.
And I hate to do this because I know I have many questions for this topic. I'm going to take one more from the hand in the back that I saw, and then hopefully we can grab Jérôme at lunch or what have you. But thank you. It's very rapid.
Oh, it's me?
Yeah.
Man in the back.
No, I didn't.
Hand in the back.
In the face of the growing reality where we have PBL or flipped classrooms, I wonder whether and the work on curriculum and ideas, mathematical ideas, I wonder whether you see an extension or possibility of using this work to suggest a more lenient way of structure of a curriculum. You know what I mean? It's allowing kids, and that ties to what you said before. Some of what the kids say in the classrooms are disregarded because the meaning of what they're saying is not really clearly, is not there. But I wonder, in the face of the technological developments and the possibilities, whether we can think of a reality where the curriculum is more of a suggestion rather than imposing what needs to be taught or learned at any given point.
I mean, it's a difficult question to address because it has more ties to other things. But one thing that I could say is that by doing what we do, we're quite respectful of what we would call children's mathematics, for example. So of course we have this sensitivity towards this, but then talking in terms of curriculum prescriptions would be, but in terms maybe of, I mean, we mostly all know this, that there's a lot of ideas that are in the classroom that are not what we prepared for, but that are worth investigating. So we're not offering any new idea in that sense. That's mostly what I could, and we're not even at the level of, what I thought we were going to is flipped classroom, what other sort. We would be interested in mapping them also to see maybe the network is very different. We have no idea, but that's also something we could
Thank you so much.